Been a fan of yours for many years, and every film I feel as if you reinvent the way the movie and the score work together to tell the story. So, just basically to dive in, because we don't have that much time, I wanted to, get a little bit of sort of like where you started. I read about your bio and your work in with Van Morrison, and then you switched over and really got into musical composition. So who or what were some of the what was the inspiration in the beginning, and some of the composers that you looked up to and wanted to emulate at the start of your career?
Oh my goodness. Well, because my background at that point was in jazz and electronic music, I guess I obviously listened to Vangelis, as he came out of the electronic world and was becoming, Blade Runner was coming out, and then Jean-Michel Jarre. Maurice Jarre.
Yes.
Did Witness. Witness was a very early electronic score, which, I remember taking notice of and thinking, oh my goodness, there's all that technology being used in a new way.
And also the Big Blue, I'm sure, was a Le Grand Bleu. I think that must have been inspiration as well. It was very much in the same genre.
Yeah, and so it was a burgeoning world at that point, and I sort of felt, well, I'm allowed to do this because of them. And because my very first film was a Disney film that takes all place in nature, and yet I scored it electronically. There's some acoustic elements, but it sort of established the groundwork for the style that I still work with a great deal, where the environment, the musical environment, can be created through electronics, but for the warmth, you put an acoustic performance in front of it. And Never Cry Wolf, it was bassoon and a chamber orchestra and percussion, and that sort of stuck with me throughout a lot of my career. Obviously, I've learned to write for orchestra over this last number of years and really enjoy that. And but the path came in through that. And then, of course, when I started working with Alan Rudolph, he loved my jazz sensibility. So there was a big jazz influence in all the movies I've done with him.
Yes. Now, that inspires me to ask another question. You said that you have learned to write for orchestra. Did you study music, and when you did study music, did you write, or was that part of your education, or was this something that more progressed over time?
I am completely self-taught, basically. In high school, I realized that I was a musician. There was no question about it. So I practiced. I would cut class to go and practice, that sort of thing. There was a music theory class of which I bought my Walter Piston book and went through it in 2 weeks, and then spent. I was voraciously searching for knowledge. My parents were very supportive, and they found me a composition teacher that I studied briefly from one summer. I lasted in college about 4 months and dropped out, and just really went to work. I started working as a professional trumpet player and just started writing. And because electronics were starting to grow at that point, I bought a tape machine and as soon as I could afford it, a synthesizer, and that was my education, was just by doing it. So I have never taken an official orchestration class or classical composition class beyond the brief summer analyzing Bartók string quartets.
Wow.
But I sat in the orchestra. I played in an orchestra under Seiji Ozawa. I've played under Carlos Chavez. I mean, I've experienced a lot of classical music from within the orchestra. So it's not like it's an unfamiliar terrain to me. I just don't know. I haven't picked apart Wagner and Scriabin and Brahms like a Juilliard trained composer has. But I know enough about it that when it was offered to me the chance to write, I said, yes, let me dive in. And thank God at that point, the music technology had evolved, and I could mock up some rough demos of using, string patches and start to see, I think this will work. And of course, I could avail myself of the tremendous talent here in the Los Angeles area and ask for advice and ask an orchestrator, look, if I do this, is this going to work? And they would say, no, why don't you try this way? And so, but it was the story of my entire career. I've just learned by doing. I've just taken the opportunity, taken the job, and said, yeah, I'll figure it out. Or to the producers, I said, of course I can do this. And then you go home and you figure it out.
That really speaks to a tremendous level of confidence. And there are people who've, completed masters and doctorates in musical composition and analysis, and many of them never feel confident enough to be able to do something like this. Where do you think this confidence came from? Do you think it was instilled in you by your parents, or was it just self-born?
I think it was of my own, because my father was an academic. He was much more the one that wanted to study about it and talk about it and read about it, and he had a long and lovely career as a teacher and a professor. And he wrote one book. So he was not inspired to the doingness. He was inspired to the intellectual side and the talking and teaching side. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to read about it. I wanted to make it.
So this was your form.
I wanted to write a piece that used harmony like Wagner, so I could really understand how it worked and why it worked, and what I could learn from that technique to apply to something that would sound like, that would be mine.
So basically, you're telling me you were a rebel.
Well, I don't know if it's a rebel. I think if you look at a lot of people who seem to get things done in this world, that seems to be the way to do it. If you want to do it, then you have to do it. You can't just sit around and talk about doing it. You actually have to do it.
Right. And I think that's truly going to be very inspirational to the readers who are, and a lot of our readers are in the film business or students of film or contemplating going into the business, and reading something like this, I think will really, I hope, open people's eyes, and instead of thinking or talking about it, just getting in there and doing it, which is great. It's great to hear.
Don't get me wrong. It's very necessary to recognize there's a gap in one's understanding of something, and if there's a technology involved in the doing this, that one has to get a grasp on it, or one has to put a competent person next to you
right.
to help you through it. That's a crucial part of this process. But I would take, if I saw an orchestral score coming that needed to be very romantic, I took 2 weeks out and bought all the Samuel Barber scores and all the some Gorecki scores, and just poured over these things and said, all right, that effect that he gets in the third symphony, how does he do that? Oh, okay. Now how can I use that? So there's plenty of study time in here, but it's not going to class every day. It's
right.
Going out and finding out exactly what I need to know to do what I want to do.
So now, talking about doing, I imagine the way that you got projects at the very beginning, let's say your first 10 scores, to now, can you walk us through what that process is like? You get a phone call, I imagine, from your agent, and you hear about a project. What happens then? So sort of like, how does, hearing about a project that, such director, well, actually, let's go to the current one. You heard that the unbearable weight of a massive talent. Tom Gormican is making a film. How did that happen? How did it come about?
Well, at this point in my career, my agent, has her ear to the ground, and she knows when these films are coming around to looking at composers. And so she called me and said, look, put a reel together. I think you'd be great for this film. So I put a reel together and sent it off. And they didn't hire me. So I said, well, that's fine. It's a clever idea. Having not seen it, I don't even know if it would work. It's very clever, but it could be disastrous.
Right.
An idea like that, so unique, does it work? I didn't think much more about it, and then a couple of months later, the agent calls back and says, they're on the phone with you to do this film. They're very serious. They're pretty sure you're the guy that's actually going to bring this home. So obviously, it hadn't worked, their earlier choice. And so I met with them, and I said, well, look, I really need to see this to know anything about how I could even discuss it with you. And so they showed it to me, and by God, it worked. It was very entertaining. It was hysterically funny. And again, that clever idea really did Tom pulled it off. He made the film that he dreamed of when he thought this whole thing up, and he actually got it made, and it works. So I said, look, I think what we should do here is, so that we can keep the tongue-in-cheek to a degree, but then not sell the music short, is do a sort of a traditional John Barry, Lalo Schifrin, Ennio Morricone influenced score.
Yeah.
That they're going to have all those great, grand gestures and cool, 70s and 60s sounds to it, and it'll make you feel as if, you are watching a timeless actor, because there's timeless music in the background. And yet you'll be able to be serious, you'll be able to be romantic, you'll be able to hit, be Western, as they draw their guns on each other. And you'll be able to hit all those beats, and yet it won't be, it won't be dark and brooding, Chernobyl.
Right.
It'll be fun because you're paying tribute to the masters here. And I just thought that would fit with Nick's character, the fact that we're looking at a history of 40 years of filmmaking. You're looking at a master here. So they loved the idea. I did about 25 minutes of music on the first pass, and they loved it. And so we just kept going, got it done.
Now, I'm glad you referenced some of the other composers that you were working with and that you were trying to reference. I thought I heard a nod to the beginning of Mission Impossible. Was that intentional?
Yes, of course.
Yes. That's I when I heard that, I said it was a genius take, and I love how it ties to the mood that you're setting.
Yeah, even some Mancini in there. I used some bass and alto flute stuff. I mean, I tried to just be subtle and respectful. And in borrowing, I stole pretty flagrantly that Ennio Morricone tremolo guitar from the westerns. And,
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that I just said, this is it's the right gesture.
Right.
And Tom agreed. I mean, he said, as soon as he heard that guitar, he said, let's have more of that.
It's so nice when you as a composer and the director are on the same page, and it just makes everything move so much more smoothly. But now that's wonderful, but have there been times where you've delivered music and a director has just not been into it at all? Or do you?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Not that often. I mean, what I try to do, and what I did with Tom, and fortunately it worked, was that I delivered that first pass,
right.
in enough time so that if he hated it, we had time for a second pass. I remember very clearly working with Jodie Foster on our third film, I think, and I delivered that first pass, and she said, no, it's not right. It's this, and this. I said, well, quite frankly, those are some of the adjectives you said you wanted. She
right.
said, well, then both of us are wrong. So I said, well, okay, good. We have time, so let's talk through this again and give me more what you've come to realize you want here. And she did, and I changed it, and it's got a Golden Globe nomination. So it worked. But,
right.
But you schedule these things out, and you develop a relationship with your director so that you can talk out any misunderstandings or any changes of heart,
So talk to me a little bit about when you say you had time. What is the normal, or what is the preferred amount of time from the moment you receive the film so that you can start working on it to the time that you get to deliver your first pass, and then when you have to deliver your final, the final composition?
It depends. It depends on the number of minutes. I mean, the usual traditional time was 6 to 8 weeks. If you're doing a heavy action score, you need more. You need at least 8 to 10 weeks. I did a river runs through it, I think, in 3 weeks.
Really?
Just because all of a sudden, 3.5 weeks, it was shy of a month. I remember that. But that was a long, many long nights. When a studio says this film has to be done by such and such a date, usually these things, one sleep schedule doesn't enter their pattern. They don't care. They just need it done. So, but some scores are 17 minutes long. Some scores are 9 minutes long. So that's the crucial number. And if you see 90 minutes looming, then you have to discuss this with production and tell them you've just asked for 90 minutes of music. That's going to take 3 months. And just know that that's what it's going to take.
Right. And you got an Academy Award nomination for it. So perhaps having that short amount of time, I'm correct, right?
Well, I did, yes.
Yes.
And I tend to like to have a deadline, because then experimenting is fine, and I like experimenting, and I like putting a certain amount of time up for experimenting, but I also like sort of being in the position where you have to sort of make decisions.
Right.
The waffling about, door number 1, door number 2, waffling about that for 2 weeks does not help anybody. If you have 5 options through experimentation, then in a day, be able to pick the right option and move on.
Right.
Don't spend 3 weeks coddling that decision.
I know we're running up short of time. I wanted to go back to a moment in time where you went from working on Nell, and then one of the next films that you had was Blade. A very, very different type of film, a very, very different type of genre. Are you comfortable doing those types of switches? Do you enjoy that?
I do, actually. I sort of relish it.
Okay.
If you're doing, something that's you spend a long time on it, then it's nice just to be able to switch gears. If you're being soft and romantic and introspective, then all of a sudden it's nice just to stab a knife through someone's throat and suck their blood.
Yeah, and The Hitcher was one of my favorite horror movies when I was in high school, and I remember the night when I saw it on a VCR, and then The Reversal of Fortune, again, such different films, such incredible scores, and Reversal of Fortune is absolutely one of my favorite films of all time, and most of it is because of the incredible feeling that you generated, with that tremendous score.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Now, last moments here. Are you able to share with us what we can look forward to hearing from you coming up?
Yes, I am currently doing the second season, or the second mini season of The Nevers for HBO.
Oh, wonderful!
Wonderful show.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite shows, and really, really enjoying that. And then Godfather Harlem will be coming back for season 3. So there's, and I hear that Justified is coming back, and I think I just closed that deal. So I've got some interesting television. There is a movie that's, I think we're just closing that. So I've got plenty of stuff on my plate. But The Nevers will be the next thing I think people will actually see.
Good, and we're looking forward to it. And of course, and of course, hopefully, we'll have some recognition for you during award season for The Unbearable Weight of a Massive Talent, because I truly think that that's a film that's going to live for quite a while. And if it hasn't become a classic, it's going to be an instant classic because it's just that great.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That would be such a hoot.
Yeah.
if that's the case for the music, I think the film is definitely deserving of of its own special place in history here.
No, it really is. And how often do you get an actor that plays themselves, but in a convincing way, and not like a cameo, just sort of funny moment where they come in and say a few words. It's a really, really great spin, and you helped tell that story.
Well, thank you very, very much. It was great fun to be a part of it.
Terrific. Well, I thank you very much for your time, and I wish you to have a great summer. And we look forward to catching up again next time you have a great film coming out.
Great. Well, thank you. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely.
You have a good summer as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.